You'll find my lack of faith in Star Wars disturbing. Hey there, kiddos, and welcome back to the channel. I'm Uncle Frank, hoping that you are having a great day. And in today's video, we are going to be sitting back in my very squeaky chair, relaxing, and having a conversation with all of you about Star Wars Unlimited. That's right, we are returning to the galaxy far, far away to resume our conversation about Fantasy Flight's very interesting Star Wars-based trading card game, and resuming my Doom posting about it. But before we get any further in the video, I want to make it very clear in case you did not see my original one. Star Wars Unlimited is a TCG that came out in March of last year, and about a year ago now, in November-ish, I put out a video. I think the title was Star Wars Unlimited Won't Last a Year, and I just laid out the fact that I don't have a lot of faith in the card game. And to that video's credit, it is like the second most viewed video on my channel. It's gotten a lot of engagement from very passionate Star Wars fans who are very eager to point out that the game is not dead, even now. So good on you guys. I'm rooting for you. But I also feel like I may have given the wrong impression with that video, and I just want to make it very clear before we go any further. At no point on this channel am I ever rooting for a game to fail. In fact, it is my sincere hope that most card games that get released these days succeed. You know, we are 30 years into the lifespan of TCGs as a medium, and I'd like to think that a lot of companies, especially, you know, larger projects, have access to the lessons learned from the TCGs of the past. And while, you know, it's not feasible, I think, for every card game that ever comes out to be super successful, I never want them to fail because, in my personal opinion, I think it's great if we have a TCG market that is extremely diverse in terms of its offerings. I've said this several times on the channel. I think having a multitude of games to choose from, if you are someone just getting into card games in general, whether it's unique IPs, licensed games, etc., I think that's a good thing. And I never, most of the time, root for a card game to fail. I'm sure there's at least like one or two card games throughout the last 30 years that I was probably like, I hope that goes away. None come to mind, but I'm sure there's one out there. Star Wars Unlimited is not one of them. I just stated in that video that I'm very pessimistic about its future, and I'm going to follow that up now because it is about a year later and it's time to really discuss the state of the game as it is. Give a little breakdown of the, how it looks as a buyer and seller, not necessarily as a player, because I should be clear, I haven't had a lot of chances to play the game since I first tried it out a year ago now. I have gotten some more games in, but Star Wars Unlimited, anecdotally, it doesn't really launch around here. There's not a lot of fans, not a lot of players. Only one store in my 30-mile radius of me holds boxes of it, and that's just because they hold boxes of everything. Good store, though. But with that said, we are now we're 6 sets into the game. I got a list here. It's Spark of Rebellion, the very first set in the game. Shadows of the Galaxy, Twilight of the Republic, Jump to Lightspeed, that's one worth paying attention to, Legends of the Force, and Secrets of Power. Now, why do I say Jump to Lightspeed is important to pay attention to? Well, because that set was when we started seeing collector boosters for Star Wars Unlimited. They're called Carbonite boosters, I believe. And we'll shove that off to the side for a second and just talk about the individual sets. The first bit of Doom posting I want to say when it comes to Star Wars Unlimited, beyond the general Star Wars cultural relevancy decline over the last 5 to 10 years. When did the Disney trilogy finish? I think it's been at least 10 years now, right? God. But Anyway, to the boxes themselves, despite what appears to be definitely a strong presence for the game itself, there are dedicated fans. There are, from what I can see, online tournaments that very regularly launch. And some of the higher end cards do have good sell-through rates and at good prices, but we'll talk about that in a second. The boxes themselves, for the most part, are doing not great. For reference, the MSRP for Star Wars Unlimited regular booster boxes is, I want to say it's 120. Don't quote me, but I'm 95% sure it's 120, which is not bad for a trading card game in the year of Harambe +9, right? But while the MSRP might be 120, the actual market price value of a lot of these boxes is, in some cases, less than half of that. I want to say Spark of Rebellion, the very first set, is the only one that's coasting around $80. The rest are less. I think the worst one is, Twilight of the Republic is at $40, which is pretty awful for a booster box MSRPing at 120. That's a third of its original price, intended price. And that sends some alarm bells in your ringing right away. When you hear something like that, when you hear a booster box is a third of its intended price, that's got you worried. And part of what I think is causing it is the lack of desirability, collectability for the average cards in the sets. There's not a lot of collectability there. And B, we're talking about Jump to Lightspeed again, because Jump to Lightspeed introduced those collector boosters, those carbonite boosters, with an MSRP of 300. These have the exact same deal as the collector boosters from Magic the Gathering, where you pay a higher price tag, and in return, you get higher chances of the special foil cards, the collectible cards, all that jazz, at higher rates. And I think there might even be exclusive cards you can only get in the carbonite boosters, or at the very least, that's how Magic does it. I would not be surprised if Star Wars Unlimited did it too. Now, what effect does this have on the card game in general? Well, it's actually kind of clear to see. At the time I made that original video, the carbonite boosters did not exist yet, and while boxes weren't crazy at the time, they weren't half in some cases, or a third in the worst scenario of MSRP. In fact, most of them were hovering around 110, 115 at the time for Spark of the Rebellion, and I think Shadows of the Galaxy was out at that time too. Now, what we're seeing here is cannibalization of booster boxes. People who are buying Star Wars Unlimited, who are in it for either collectability or investments, they're going for the carbonite boosters, which is actually pulling money away from the regular booster boxes by a lot, to the point where we're hearing stories now across the internet of local stores not even able to get carbonite boosters from distribution without being kind of forced into buying boxes of the regular set that they know they can't sell, which is always a great sign, right? You're being kind of forced to buy regular stuff from distribution, stuff that you can't sell. That's never a great sign, and we're seeing it all over the internet, or at the very least, I shouldn't say all over I've seen a few people talking about it, I should say. It's not like a widespread issue, but I've seen enough people talking about it that I'm like, that's worrisome. But more worrisome is the fact that even though this is happening, even though people are pulling money away from regular boosters to buy carbonite boosters, those aren't even inflating in value all that much. In fact, they're also losing value. Carbonite boosters, as I believe, have an MSRP of 300. I could be wrong, but that's what I remember. And all three sets that have carbonite boosters right now have carbonite boosters selling for about $200, which, newsflash, is less than 300 by a third. That's not great. And that's part of what I think the issue is. Okay? Carbonite boosters have undeniably cannibalized the value of regular booster boxes to the point where stores are really trying to figure out how they can maximize value, avoid getting regular boxes, and just peddle carbonite boosters to the handful of fans they can get in stores, right? But it's also this interesting case because this doesn't just reflect with the sealed product, it reflects with the singles as well and the bulk stuff. In case you guys don't know, I'm a huge bulk guy. I love buying and selling bulk. It's super relaxing for me to sift through thousands of cards a day and just organize them, right? I love doing that. And in the, feels like it's been 6 years now that I've been back on TCG Player and trying to, build up a, inventory. It feels like only once, really, have I ever had an entire set kind of fail in terms of bulk sales. I've only ever had one set completely fail to sell bulk entirely. And that was Twilight of the Republic. I think it was the third Star Wars Unlimited set. Just did not sell any bulk. That was crazy to me. Actually, no, 2 sets. Akora. Spellbound Wings, or the Akora box. Hang on. I still got one. This is Spellbound Wings. This is the comparison I'm making in my Star Wars video. This is Spellbound Wings. I bought a few of these for super cheap because I was like, hey, it's on TCG Player, so that's bulk right there. I put them up on TCG Player, and basically none of it sold. The same thing happened to Twilight of the Republic. I bought a few boxes, cracked them, traded off the singles to a friend I had online who wanted them, the higher end singles. Higher end, I don't think I really pulled anything too valuable out of those boxes. And then I put the bulk up on TCG Player, and it just did not sell. So I reached out to that same guy, and I was like, hey, do you want the bulk too? And he said, yeah. I was like, all right, here you go. And I kind of washed my hands of it entirely. So I can now safely say there's only 2 card games where even the bulk won't sell. And one of them is Akora. Which, have you guys even heard of Akora? This was a Kickstarter TCG. You guys know how much I feel about... You guys know how I feel about these. Not a huge fan of Kickstarter TCGs in general. But yeah, to wrap this video up and to, kind of get my point across, while I don't want Star Wars Unlimited to fail as a card game, I am just not seeing the player demand. Yes, I'm not saying player demand isn't there. I'm not saying that there's not fans, but locally, regionally, I'm not seeing a lot of people interested in playing the game. I'm definitely not seeing a lot of people interested in buying the sealed product, because if they are, then $40 booster boxes would be a freaking huge buy signal if you were actually into the game. And I'm not seeing a lot of people interested in anything other than the highest end cards for collecting, investing purposes. Which, all things being fair, that's how it is for a lot of other card games. Yu-Gi-Oh! In particular is a great sign of a card game that has most of its boxes come out and losing huge amounts of value, sometimes 50%, right? But here's the counter to that devil's advocate play right there. Yu-Gi-Oh! Is 20 plus years old and has a huge fan base propping the game up. It's most game stores around the states that run tournaments, they probably have a Yu-Gi-Oh! Presence in some capacity with people who are usually interested in buying, especially a lot of the older retro cards. Star Wars Limited does not have that at present. The game is a year old, has barely broken out of its initial tournament meta, and just does not have the legs that Yu-Gi-Oh! For instance, does have. As much as we like to clown on Yu-Gi-Oh! On this channel, and go watch my videos, I do it a lot. I make fun of Yu-Gi-Oh! At almost every opportunity, but Yu-Gi-Oh! Does have a large and robust fan base of players, deck brewers, content creators, anime fans, investors, retro fans, waifu collectors, rush duel collectors. Yu-Gi-Oh!'s got a lot of fans of a lot of different types, and that really helps prop up the IP. But Star Wars Unlimited has a niche market already. Star Wars fans, and, you know, some niche card game fans. But it also, in addition to being a niche audience, it has a niche within the niche of Star Wars fans who want to play a card game. And I hate to break it to you, but a lot of Star Wars fans, again, this is anecdotal, a lot of Star Wars fans I know are more interested in collecting older Star Wars merch, figurines. If they're going to go after cards, they're going to go after trading cards like the Topps line. Any of the Topps lines, there's a lot of top Star Wars cards. They're not necessarily all that interested, especially the older guys. They're not all that interested in learning another new card game because Star Wars has had several over the years. Some of them quite old, quite desirable even, pretty rare at that too. So a lot of them, I've talked to a few of them over the last year or so about this. Not all of them. I should probably sit the rest of them down and have a chat at some point, but that's neither here nor there. You know, their general response seems to be, it's another Star Wars card game, who cares? You know, it is what it is. So, you know, it has a very thin niche that it has to fill. It's struggling, and it's made decisions like these Carbonite boosters without really having the infrastructure, the player infrastructure, the collectible infrastructure to really maintain something like collector boosters, Carbonite boosters, whatever you want to call them, right? I call them collector boosters because that's what they are. So it's made this, in my opinion, the Carbonite booster, collector booster situation, I'm going to get my tongues all twisted up. In my opinion, these collector boosters were a mistake. You introduced them only 4 sets into the game's lifespan. They have cannibalized the hell out of the regular booster boxes, and they have vaporized collectability. Because this was going to be its own video. This really should be its own video. But I genuinely believe that the best kind of collectible you can have is the one that occurs due to natural playable demand combined with nostalgia, combined with just niche appeal. Okay? And what does that mean? I mean, the best kind of collectibles in a card game aren't the ones that are created because the company artificially creates these rare or sought after pieces like signature cards, serialized cards, alternate art, crazy nonsense. The best kind of collectibles, in my opinion, when it comes to games like Magic, Yu-Gi-Oh, Pokemon, etc., are the cards that were either just very popular when they came out for whatever reason, like Charizard, for instance, is a collectible card because back in the day, Charizard was highly sought after, and nowadays it still is. Had some kind of tournament relevancy or meta relevancy. You know, looking at you, insert any of the OG dual lands, which were mega playable and are now super rare because they were never reprinted, or even just had some sort of wow factor to them. Looking at like Dark Magician Girl or Blue Eyes from Yu-Gi-Oh! You know, the original printings of those cards are still very much in demand just because of their historical relevancy. When you try to create artificial demand like what Star Wars is doing, artificial collectability like what Star Wars is doing with these Carbonite boosters, you kind of create this fake demand that, in my opinion, doesn't hold up well long term and is, in my opinion, doomed to fail from the start. And we've seen this with collector boosters from Magic the Gathering. Before the serialized cards really came around and before people really started to see value in collector boosters, they weren't that much in demand. They came in, Throne of Eldraine, and lasted for a while before anyone really started paying attention to them. And let me tell you, that first year or so of collector boosters being out, no one really went for them. You know, additional gimmicks, additional sales pitches had to go into the product itself in order to really get people paying attention to it. And that's never a good sign if your high-end box is cannibalizing and doesn't even have anything special to offer to the players, to the collectors. If you have to add extra stuff onto it to get sales, that's not a great sign. And that was coming from Magic the Gathering, which has a huge player base, a huge collector base. What's that going to mean for Star Wars when a bad set comes around? Like a genuinely bad set. Is just no one going to buy it? Are stores going to have 2 different kinds of boxes from one set that they can't sell? And, you know, what happens when the entire TCG market shifts? Because that's something you got to pay attention to as well. You know, right now we're still kind of in this very hype-ish, bullish period in TCG history. When people stop paying attention to Pokemon cards, they stop paying attention to Magic collector boxes, and they start buying less and less and less. Do you guys honestly think Star Wars won't be affected, won't be negatively impacted by that? I think it will. Maybe not as affected as it would be by, say, a total U.S. economic collapse, but it would still be affected. And I think a game that's only barely a year old, that is already struggling to stay above water, if tides turn and the waves get a bit choppy, it might start sinking. That's all I want to say. And it looks like it is sinking if you just look at the box prices and if you look at the sales volume for a lot of the singles. Things don't look great from a purely buyer/seller perspective. Again, I didn't want to try to approach this from the player angle just because I haven't had a lot of opportunities to play. So for all you guys out there who are diehard fans of the game, that's good. I want to reiterate, I don't want Star Wars to fail. I really feel like I have to reiterate that. I don't want any card games to fail. Maybe a Korra, though. This is a weird one. But I see the writing on the wall, and the writing on the wall tells me that this game is not destined for getting over that 2-year wall. So I guess what I'm going to say right now is I still am very pessimistic about Star Wars' future. I do not have faith that it will break over that 2-year wall. So I suppose the title of this video is Star Wars Will Not Last Another Year. And I'll leave it at that. And I'll see you guys in another 12 months to hopefully, genuinely hopefully, be wrong. I do sincerely hope that the company does something to give this game a bit more life. I don't know what it would be, but I hope something happens. Anyway, that's all I got. This video dragged on for a lot longer than I kind of wanted it to, but I probably only going to talk about this for this one time, and maybe like another 3 months or so when the after the holiday season, because holiday season's a good time to talk about card games. But for now, just want to leave it at that. I hope you guys enjoyed. Please leave a like, share, subscribe. Do you agree with me? Do you think Star Wars is doomed? Or do you disagree with me like a lot of the people in the previous video did? And do you think it's going to be here forever? Let me know in the comments section below. I am curious. Just so you guys know, I do read all your comments. And as long as they're not like insanely offensive, I tend to like most of them too. Just because I like you guys being here. But anyway, that's all I got. Thank you guys so much for watching and have a great day.